Morning, everybody. And thank you for having me today. You just heard from my good friend Don Bacon. We speak at a lot of different events. We love NAB2. There's no other venue where you feel like you're walking into an MMA cage fight. And I got to tell you, you truly are the best human beings on the planet. You know, we talk to a lot of different groups and work with a lot of different groups, but truly salt-of-the-earth human beings, people that you want to hang out with outside of work, and that's the highest compliment I can pay. And I'm grateful to the Governing Board of Presidents, the entirety of NAB2, for the opportunity to address you alongside of so many of my colleagues on both parties and several branches of government, including President Biden, who I know you heard from yesterday. And throughout my personal career, I've always been an ardent supporter of organized labor, supporting hardworking Americans and the right for better wages, good working conditions, and fair hours, which should never be a partisan issue. And our nation, as you all know, was built and depends on incredible men and women like yourselves who welcome hard work and know the stability, the dignity, and prosperity of a good union job and what that can provide. And since I started in Congress in 2017, I've been a steadfast friend of all 3 million active members of NAB2 and all workers. And we, like Don Bacon, my colleague, and so many of my colleagues in Congress, which are going to be introducing or relaunching the Building Trades Caucus today, have been fighting for better jobs and stronger labor standards. And we will continue to fight to ensure in Congress that our government invests in America and the people who build it. And together in the 117th Congress, last cycle, we were able to accomplish so much for workers in every trade, especially NAB2 families, namely the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Let me tell you how that all came to be. Our Problem Solvers Caucus, which I'll get into in a second, it's a bipartisan group in Congress, put together a plan, a two-party solution that was going to invest in union jobs across America. There was a joke that every week was Infrastructure Week. We wanted to make it happen. As we always do, we sat in the background, we put our framework together, we allowed the administration and congressional leaders to try to negotiate. Those negotiations failed, and it was our bipartisan bloc that actually were outcome determinative in drafting it and getting it across the finish line. It was an historic achievement that's already been successful in bringing our nation's physical infrastructure network into the 21st century, creating good-paying union jobs and keeping the United States competitive with all of our adversaries. And I'm proud to be a champion of this once-in-a-lifetime investment to construct and improve our highways, our bridges, our roads across the nation and expand broadband access, enhance highway and pipeline safety, and improve water and wastewater systems. And before Congress enacted this bipartisan bicameral law, the American Society of Civil Engineers graded the strength, health, and safety of our national infrastructure in 2017. The United States received a D+. The richest, most prosperous nation in the world got a D+ in infrastructure. Every single person here knows that's unacceptable and irresponsible in this era. The United States cannot fall behind any of our competing countries, particularly China, by the way, who spends 10 times the amount on infrastructure as a percentage of GDP every year outside of China, more than we do in our own country. It's important to bolster supply chains. It's important to broaden industry capacity, sparking innovation, raising the standard of living for generations to come. And the significant investment made by the federal government will not only last these 5 years of the infrastructure bill's authorization, it will spur decades of projects, private investment, growth in communities across the country, increasing the need for essential skilled workers like every one of you. And there's still a lot of work to be done, however, phase 2 of the infrastructure bill, if you will, to ensure that we are building a lasting and better future for working families across our country. And that's why Congress, and we're going to be leading the charge on this, must take up key reform proposals to continue to invest in American workers. Last month, for example, I proudly joined my colleagues in introducing H.R. 20, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act. That is, and let me tell you, the strength of the people that represent you on Capitol Hill, and I don't want to mention names because I'll forget one, but you know who they are, They are just some of the most amazing people on the planet. And the reason I love them so much, not only is the cause good and just, but they focus on a mission of labor. They're not dedicated to any one political party. We all know both parties are broken. All of us know that. They focus on the mission of labor. And because of that, the PRO Act, the most expansive pro-labor piece of legislation in American history, was introduced with one Republican, myself, one Democrat, Bobby Scott. It's bipartisan on introduction. And that shows the strength of the organized labor movement in America, and that's why it's important that we keep it bipartisan. And this critical legislation protects against unfair management practices designed to discourage union membership and guarantees better conditions for our workers. It also stands to prevent employers from classifying employees as exempt from union protections. The PRO Act will prevent management from undercutting the wages and benefits that hardworking NAB2 members have earned for themselves and their families. And as we fight to protect the workers of today, we must also invest in the building trades workforce of tomorrow. And that is why this week I will lead a bipartisan coalition to introduce a National Apprenticeship Act. And our bill will provide much-needed reinforcement and reauthorization of our registered apprenticeship programs and will aim to create 1 million new apprenticeship positions over the next 5 years. And when we invest in these programs, we create the opportunity to grow our economy, prepare workers for in-demand careers, and address the trained workforce shortage. By closing the skills gap and enhancing registered apprenticeship models, Congress can guarantee the next generation of Americans have greater access to high-skilled, good-paying union jobs. And all of these legislative efforts and so many others are only possible when our leaders embrace ideological differences and work across the aisle for the people that elect them. There are too many challenging issues that our nation faces that recognize no individual background, no individual political persuasion. And at a time when I believe hyperpartisanship is the single biggest threat facing our nation, I believe that bipartisanship is the only remedy. As Sean had mentioned, I co-chair the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's a group, and as you all know, there's a continuum of ideological groups in Congress. On the far right, you have the Freedom Caucus. Far left, you have the Progressive Caucus. As you inch in, you got the Republican Study Group, you got the New Dems, you got the Tuesday Group, you got the Blue Dog Democrats, and then there's only one group that's bipartisan. In fact, it's equal. It's a Noah's Ark rule. If you want to join, you have to find somebody from the opposite party to join with you. We're called the Problem Solvers Caucus. We're 64 members, 32 Democrats, 32 Republicans. I'm the co-chair of that group because I believe, much like all of you, that government ought to function the same way our personal relationships do. That you don't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. You take the perspective that it's better to get 80% of something than 100% of nothing. You come to the center, you build consensus, and you move forward. And the greatest attribute of our bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus is we are unequivocally and unapologetically pro-labor. And we will stay that way. As Don mentioned, and as we all agree, we are so fortunate to live in the greatest country that God's ever created. A country that's done more good for more people than any other nation ever has and any other nation ever will. But our country is only 247 years old. That may seem like a long time, but it's not. That's just a few generations. And yet, we are the world's oldest democracy. No democracy has survived this planet for more than a few generations. And as human beings, we are all guilty of taking that for granted because we can't fathom waking up any morning in this country to the thought that America is not the world's currency standard, the U.S. dollar is not the world's currency standard, America is not the world's military and economic superpower. That can go away like that. And just ask any of our friends and allies and colleagues in Ukraine who were 30 years into their independence and are fighting for their independence again against brutal acts of genocide. Our country is very, very fragile. We have the greatest system of government that the world's ever created. I represent the city of Philadelphia, and after we won our independence in 1776, it wasn't until 1787 we came up with the Great Compromise. There's the word, called the U.S. Constitution. When Ben Franklin emerged from that constitutional convention and the paperboy came up to him because the word had spread throughout Philadelphia that they had come up with a compromise. He wanted to be the first to report it. He said, "Sir, what kind of government have you given us?" And Ben Franklin responded, "A republic, if you can keep it." A republic. They came up with a brand new system of government called the Great American Experiment that in and of itself was a product of compromise. The big states wanted government based on population. The small states wanted equal states' rights. They said, how about we compromise? How about we do both? And you guys got to work together. If you can keep it. He was also saying that even though it's the best system of government in the world, it's also the most fragile. And it depends on vigilance. Our existential threat, more than any other that we face here in the United States, is that of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And when I tell my colleagues and sell my pro-labor credentials and my pro-labor beliefs, this is what I tell them. You should support it for a number of reasons. You should support it because it's building and investing in America. The standards are higher. The wages are better for American workers. It's good for the economy. But it's also critical for our national security. Because when you look back 247 years that we've survived, and it's no guarantee that it will survive in the future, and that China is our existential threat, what's going to protect us from that? It's all of you. It is all of you. It is the people that are the nuts and bolts of the American economy, the American family, and the stars and stripes. That is why I don't just work alongside of you. I don't just consider you friends. I consider you family. And I will leave you with this. The greatest quality that anybody can have in this world is loyalty. Because life is very short. We know that. Loyalty of our friends, loyalty of our family. The greatest quality of the organized labor movement is loyalty. You have the backs of people that have your back. And I can't tell you how important that is, not just going through life, but as a member of Congress, we will die on the floor for you when you have our back. And thank you for being bipartisan. Thank you for supporting two-party solutions, because the only way we sustain this movement is that we don't succumb to the political winds when the pendulum swings back and forth. This movement is here and here to stay. Not just protecting prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon, that's the easy stuff, but advancing things like the PRO Act that will solidify that in legislation for the remainder of our time here on this planet and going forward in future generations. Thank you all for having me. We have your back, and thank you for all you do to keep America the greatest country that God's ever created. God bless you.